This is the Borth podcast, where smart ideas spark new opportunities. If you're ready to see money in a whole new way and build a life on your terms, you're in the right place.
Hello, welcome back to the Borth podcast. Recently, I've been rereading Robert Kiyosaki's The Cashflow Quadrants. We do it for our Factum Book Club, and I lead the book club. And it's funny, I got the book right in front of me, and we're just marking it up. And I've read this book a number of times. I've listened to it on audiobook. And it's funny how when you reread something that you've read multiple times, things that were right in front of you that you hadn't noticed kind of come back to you. Or it's like this slapping you alongside the head. Why didn't I see that before? How come I didn't recognize it? I don't think we were quite ready for it. Maybe I read it and just wasn't relevant to my thought process at the time. But so I wanted to just touch on a little bit of that book today and bring in some thoughts I had around that book. And it's funny because most things in life, I rarely find 100% agreement with most things I read or most things I come across, because it is always like, again, it might be true, might just be an opinion. That was one of the things that he brought up that I reread, and was like, what you think to be the truth might just be somebody's opinion. And so we need to kind of assess that and understand, not that you can't make financial decisions based on opinions, but just understand that their opinions may be not true. And I've podcasted on that previously, but what I wanted to get to here was a couple of different things that he says in the book. And we love the Cashflow Quadrants. I love the teaching that he has. It's like, what side of the quadrant you're on? How do you think? How do you think about scarcity and abundance, income, just different things and different mindsets. And I think there's a real value to that in our lives. Like, Nelson Nash said in his book, Becoming Your Own Banker, you need to rethink your thinking, right? And he also, in the title says, Becoming Your Own Banker. And again, the strongest word in that whole title is becoming. Who do you need to become? And when we say becoming, that's usually from a mental standpoint. That's usually from a, how am I growing myself in my thought process? So who do I need to become in order to be able to serve my purpose and my family's purpose at a much higher level? So with that being said, what Robert Kiyosaki talks about Cashflow Quadrants is this idea of we have either employees, self-employed, business owners, or investors. And they think a little bit differently. But, the interesting part, and the part I'll give to you can go back and read the book if you'd like. But the point he makes is like, everybody, if you're on the left-hand side of the quadrant, you're an employee or you're self-employed, and basically called self-employed people that buy their jobs, right? So they're still employees, but they're their own taskmaster, as it were. So you have employees who are working for other people, making other people's dreams come true, or you have a self-employed person who may have a great income and they have a high income, but the value that they have is themselves. And they don't necessarily have a system. So if they go on vacation, their ability to earn income goes on vacation. So where he goes to next is on the right-hand side of the quadrant, which is here's the B, which is a business owner, which is a system or a process to help you grow and develop a business. So you can step away. You can, share it with other people. When you share that business with other people, it becomes more and more valuable because other people now have ownership and they want to see it succeed. And then you have investors down in the lower right-hand quadrant. Now, the investors, there's different levels of investors he talks about. And you can go read about that. But the interesting point is that I would make here is that each of those is dependent on one thing that he kind of brings up in his book, but he doesn't expand on it well. In my mind, he doesn't expand on it well enough. And that's the part where I really want to talk about is like, he talks about as a business owner, why would you use your own money to buy a deal, or an investor, why would you spend your own money to invest in a property, or, he's using real estate, whatever it might be. And he says, so use the bank. He says, if you're in one of the levels of investors, are you savers or losers? And I disagree with that part of it. I think you need to save so you can invest, so you can have a sense of security that you're looking for. And we can have that discussion. But the point I would make is like, if you're saving at the bank, then I would probably agree with him. But if you're saving in a position of liquidity, not so much just savings, and you have it in the right environment, then you're not losing to inflation, you're not losing to taxes, you're not losing to all these other things he talks about. And so he doesn't really expand on that, but that would be the point where I would say that's where your whole life policy lives and really thrives, quite frankly, is that area of, if you're saving, make sure it's in the right environment, getting all the benefits, because then it gives you some authority, it gives you some power. So the part that he misses, that he kind of mentions, that everybody has to use the banks, right? If you're saving in the banks, or if an employee or you're self-employed, you have to use the banks. And this idea of the banker being in all aspects of our lives. So we put money there if we're going to save. But the problem is, if we put money there, what happens? Somebody else is going to make money. You're going to finance somebody else's dreams. And if I'm an investor, I need the banker because I want to leverage somebody else's money. Where this comes into play a little bit more is, just imagine, the banker is always in the middle. You're so concerned and you're so focused on what we call new money coming into the system. That's what you do, is you say, I need to go earn a higher level of income. That's typically people on the left-hand side of the quadrant. I need to earn more money. I need to get a better job. I need to get a raise. I need to, become self-employed so I can control the means of production, whatever it is, right? So it's that new money coming in. And really, people on the right-hand side of the quadrant kind of think the same thing too. Like, I need to bring in new money. I need new cash flow. Versus, what if we controlled the old money or the existing dollars that's already there? Again, here's the mind shift that I think he talks about briefly in his book. And when I was reading this, it really made me think about this idea is like, new money coming in is always great. But if you're in the left-hand side of the quadrant, if you're an employee or self-employed, which are fine, but you're always dependent on you being at work, trading that asset, which is your time, for money. And that's new money coming in. People on the right-hand side of the quadrant think, what if I had old money coming in or new money coming in because of, return on operations of my business, or an investor has sold some property and I had some gain on it. The whole point is like always focusing on the new money. Where banks, the interesting part about how banks think is they look and say, well, let's talk about your existing dollars, because they want to bring in dollars into the bank and then turn around and lend them out at a profit to somebody else so they can go and invest or, run their business or buy a car or, expand their operations, whatever it might be. So they're the person that's in the middle, really just dealing with existing dollars within your sphere, right? So if you imagine this, what we want to do is like not take the banker out of it, but let's replace the banker with you. So think about that. Now, what ends up happening is like now we're focusing on this idea of like, hey, new money's great. New money, everything needs to grow, needs new dollars coming in. But what if we took our existing dollars and we started thinking about how could I use those existing dollars and profit from those existing dollars, like Wells Fargo or anybody else might. And that's where this idea of infinite banking, money has to flow somewhere. And so with that being said, if money flows somewhere, why don't we want to have permanent control of our money? Think about that for 1 second. What does permanent control of your money look like? What do you think about that? If we have permanent control of our money, it doesn't mean it flows away and then Wells Fargo gets profit off of it. We get to profit out of it. If we're using it for ourselves, or if we're using it to lend to a business owner, we're lending it to a real estate flipper, we're lending it to somebody that's going to be doing some investing. What if we became the lender? Most people have this preconceived notion that that's not possible. We can't do that. Well, that notion in our head, again, that stronghold, that thought, that belief, that opinion that we take as truth, as fact, is what's going to hold you back. So let me show it again. The idea that we can't take control of the banking function of our lives, that's a hurdle that holds so many people back. So I would encourage you to think about how you could take control of the banking function of your lives. I mean, this is what we love. I love having this conversation. This is what I've been doing for, almost 20 years. And the idea of how do we take control of the banking function in our lives so we can have permanent control over our dollars. And then when we start looking at Robert Kiyosaki's idea of like the left side of the quadrant, right side of the quadrant, both of them need to be served by a banking function. So you're going to win no matter who you serve it. And if you have a great job or you have a great income, but you're afraid that when I quit working, that income stops. So now I have to consume my 401k. But what if there's a better way? What if we said, let's set up a banking function so we can find other people we can lend our money to? There's a lot of people that we can borrow money to, and the structures and the processes that we can actually make that work and make it safe for you. Not we, but you would be doing it. And you're going to lend money. You could possibly lend money to, you start with probably lending money to your own self, or maybe to your own family, or to your own business, or your own investments, but there are other opportunities out there. And that's where now we're starting creating our own business, our own system. And we're not having to trade time for money anymore. We're going to trade money for more money. It's kind of the way it works. I'm going to go out and I'm going to put, $100,000 out on the street, and you could go do something else, and it's going to come back with a whole lot more. That's the intent. Then when that money starts working for you, that's when the real magic here. I shouldn't say magic. There's no magic here. It's like you take $100,000, you pay 5% for it, you turn around and lend it out at 10%. That's 100% markup on your dollars. And again, Robert Kiyosaki's principle. We're not using our own money. If we're doing this right, and if we're applying the infinite banking concept to this idea, we're not using our own money. That's the beauty of it. Whose money are we using? Typically using the insurance company's money. Think about that for a second. We're using the insurance company's money. We use our money as collateral, but our money's still safe. It's still in that account, still growing, still compounding, uninterrupted. All those things you've heard people talk about. But the idea here is that now we're using the banks and the insurance company's money to lend out to other people. And I can't tell you how many people have, not the stumbling block that they have, because again, they have this preconceived notion, this opinion that they've made into a truth that holds them back. That, if you're borrowing from the insurance company, you're using the insurance company's money, you're not using your own money. And that's the truth of the matter. But the opinion that's out there is like, why would I pay interest by using my own money? Well, why wouldn't you? You really want to run a business, don't steal from your business, right? You want your business to succeed. You want this business that we're talking about right now for you to be in control, to be as successful as possible. Because now, once you can prove that it works and finding other opportunities to lend you money, now it becomes money working for you versus you working for money. And that's the real value, and that's the real beauty of this. Because again, just remember, the money that flows to Wells Fargo, either a borrower or if you're a saver, is always going to the bank, and then they have control over those dollars. But what if you could take control of those dollars and have permanent control the rest of your life? Then you win as a saver and you win as a borrower, and you don't have to worry about, savers or losers comment, because again, you're saving your dollars so you can turn around and borrow it. You're basically not even saving money, you're reinvesting into your banking business, as it were. So again, we have to be careful, because, people say, you're running a bank. No, I'm putting money in my policies, and I'm thinking like a banker. And how I'm still applying some of the banking principles. I can lend money to my family or to friends or whoever it might be and say, hey, I'll lend you X amount of dollars, but the expectation that money is going to come back with interest. Why is that? That's the banking function. That's the banking principle. Now, the reason why you saved isn't so you can save because you're not going to beat inflation through savings, but now you've created this pool of money, this pool of capital that you can deploy at the right time. Maybe to take advantage of opportunities. If you're going to be a real estate investor, you're going to buy some houses when the market crashes again. That's going to happen. So are you prepared for that? Or can you borrow it to, again, that's borrowing from your family banking function to your real estate function in your family. They're all within you, but you have to understand that each of them should be run as separate business. So that's the idea of infinite banking. And then you go from this idea of that saving is bad to saving is great, because it creates opportunities for me to go really grow my money and use my dollars to grow that asset. So, that's this idea of if money flows, anytime it flows to Wells Fargo, if you're borrowing, they love you equally the same. So all I'd say is cut them out of the equation. Imagine putting your own family banking entity into that situation. Now you have that permanent control. So this is again the idea of money's going to flow into us. We have some choices. They're very straightforward, they're very simple choices. We provide a couple of great opportunities where you can take your money, increase your liquidity, have permanent control, and now start showing you how to take permanent control of those dollars for the rest of your life. So I'll leave you with this question, right? If you added up all the money you will ever earn, that you earn in the next 10 years, how much do you want to have permanent control over? So let's just do a quick exercise. You make $100,000 this year, and let's say you don't have a raise for the next 10 years. You're going to have $1 million flowing into your life. how much of it do you want to have permanent control over? I would make the argument that if you understand what's going on here, you're going to want that number to be 30, 40, or 50%. Of all the dollars that flow through your hands, how much of that do you want to have permanent control? Again, hopefully the number isn't 5% of what you have. Hopefully it's much greater than that, because that's going to grow you that certainty that you're looking for in retirement. That's going to grow you the strength of running a business, running the banking function in your life to provide you passive income when you want to stop trading time for money. Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate you listening to the conversation here, because it is a passion of mine to help people understand that it doesn't need to be complicated. Pretty straightforward. We can make it complicated if we want. But the idea is, do we have a system and a process and a structure set up? I would say absolutely we do. Connect with us. We'll show you how in your life you can control that. But it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of effort. And it takes some discipline, but it also takes the ability to think and take some action. So again, thank you so much. We'll look forward to having our future conversation on this, because again, this is not a conversation that's going away. I've had multiple podcasts. I thought this was a way for us to see this in a different light. And again, it was just because I was reading, Robert Kiyosaki's Cashflow Quadrants, and I just thought it was a perfect mix for our conversation today. Thank you.
I appreciate you spending some time with me. Change starts with understanding, and action builds the future. We'll catch you on the next episode.